Hello, and welcome. My name is Assad Khan. I'm with Centrifuge, and I'm joined by an illustrious panel of colleagues of mine and Stephen Goldfeder of Arbitrum. We'll do individual introductions here in just a second, just to frame the discussion here. Today, we're going to talk about bringing real-world assets to Arbitrum. If you haven't seen the news, Centrifuge is coming to Arbitrum. We'll be launching soon, and today we'd like to present to you a little bit of what we're doing, what's Arbitrum's story with the real-world asset space today, what we're doing with Centrifuge, and a little bit more about who we are and what's actually coming to Arbitrum. I mentioned my name already. I'll go ahead and just kick it off to Colin for an intro. We can then go to Cassie and Stephen.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Colin Cunningham. I'm the head of growth at Centrifuge. We are very excited to launch on Arbitrum, and we are very excited about this partnership. I've been here 2.5 years and excited to talk a little bit about what we offer at Centrifuge and how that'll be building the Arbitrum ecosystem. Cassidy, over to you.
Hey, everyone. My name is Cassidy, co-founder at Centrifuge. Yeah, likewise, very excited for Centrifuge launching on Arbitrum. I think this is a really big step in bringing real-world assets to this ecosystem. So yeah, happy to hear from everyone today and hopefully give you guys a look into what's coming on Arbitrum soon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Goldfeder, co-founder and CEO of Offchain Labs, which is the company that contributes to Arbitrum, initial technical builders of Arbitrum. And super excited to be here today and dive in. But the TLDR is I'm also super excited for Centrifuge launch in Arbitrum and what it means for real-world assets in the Arbitrum ecosystem, as Arbitrum has already shown itself to be a leader in DeFi. And I think there's a lot to merge there and a lot of potential for the merger of DeFi and TradFi. And I think Centrifuge is a big part of that.
Amazing. I can't wait to get into it. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. Stephen, you can kick it off and start just sharing a little bit about the Arbitrum story and kind of the real-world asset perspective. And we'll just move on to Cassidy and Colin and myself.
Hey, yeah, absolutely. Wonderful to be here. So Arbitrum, from a technical perspective, what Arbitrum does is it scales Ethereum. It scales Ethereum without compromise. What does it mean to scale Ethereum? It means low-cost transactions, so you don't want to pay a lot, but you also want them to be secure and trustless. That means you want the security to be rooted in Ethereum, and Arbitrum does that with its interactive fraud proofs, and that's how it gets Ethereum to sign off and provide its security to not only what happens on the Ethereum network, but also to what happens in the Arbitrum Layer 2 network. And the cool thing about Arbitrum is it's drop-in compatible, works just as Ethereum does, and all the tooling just works, plus a lot more. So Arbitrum has a few different public blockchains. There's Arbitrum 1, and that's on the next slide, which is the chain that a lot of people just call Arbitrum, and it has some really impressive growth numbers. It's the leading DeFi chain, leading DeFi L2, and generally number 2 in core metrics right after Ethereum. So it has about $7 billion plus in value bridged onto the chain. Among the now crowded space of Ethereum rollups, there are probably a few dozen already. It has about 55% market share in Arbitrum 1 itself, thousands of dApp integration, 13 million plus unique addresses. Next slide. So this is one of those slides, which again is a different way to show Arbitrum's dominance in the L2 space, but I think it's really important because a lot of Arbitrum is scaling Ethereum, and the core asset in this entire ecosystem is ETH. And if you look at ETH bridge to different layer 2 solutions, on the left here, that big blue bar is Arbitrum, and on the right is every other layer 2 or even a sidechain Arbitrum's competitors, also including there as alternative layer 1. So the amount of ETH bridge to Arbitrum is significantly more than all of those other chains combined. And I'm not just mentioning here as a vanity metric because like, oh, that's cool, look at that. But I think as we transition to the story of what does that mean? Well, this is liquidity. This is why Arbitrum has dominant DeFi growth. And I think this is why Arbitrum will be a leading player in real-world asset space as well, because there's a lot of, interactions there that are very, that play really well together. Over here, and this is actually, this is a late breaking updated slide. It just passed that 1 billion mark today. This is a USDC volume on Arbitrum. You can see it's far and above any other chain but Ethereum, and even certainly any other layer 2 multiple times that. And again, USDC is we spoke before about ETH, which is an important asset in sort of the crypto native communities, but I think USDC has a particularly important asset when it comes to those that are more interested in TradFi and potential real world asset integrations. And just again, it's a very simple metric when you look at the pure and raw liquidity on the chain, but also it speaks a lot about the opportunity on the chain, the users on the chain, who they are, where they're leaving their funds, and the funds that are available for solutions like Centrifuge. Next slide. This is when it comes to DEX volume. So volume traded on chain in the decentralized exchanges in these different ecosystems. And this is sort of what I was alluding to before. If you look here, Arbitrum is consistently number 2 to Ethereum itself, and Arbitrum doesn't view itself as competitive to Ethereum. So in the layer 2 space, Arbitrum is distinctly the number 1 chain when it comes to usage on the chain. So we spoke about, hey, these are the raw assets on the chain, but then you look at who's actually using this chain, what are traders doing, where are they choosing to interact and to transact, and that overwhelmingly, is Arbitrum, and has about 10x, 10x its nearest competitors in the L2 space, and also a big advantage over alternative layer 1s, even those like BSC, which are traditionally very, very strong when it comes to real world assets. So again, I think the story is the point here that I'm trying to make with these slides is Arbitrum ecosystem is ready, has shown itself capable of not only holding assets, but also deeply transacting. It has the class of assets that's, I think, most readily useful for real world assets, and really set the stage for the launch today and show you some of the potential and why I'm so excited for this. Next slide. Next slide. So just to wrap up, basically, and again, I made a bunch of these points, but just to wrap it up, our vision is to make DeFi and TradFi harmonious and really symbiotic. I think is a good word over time, where they're separate and it won't be the same. They'll never be synonymous, in my opinion, but they'll work well together and they'll feed off each other, and they'll both be better for having being resident on the same chain. And to me, Arbitrum is clearly a really strong ecosystem of choice for that to happen. Both the scalability, which is the core tech we started with, the deep liquidity, the security that we have built into the chain and to the technology as core, make it ideal for real world assets, both from a liquidity perspective, again, from a who's using it, who's transacting, and also when it comes to these assets, similar to DeFi, but potentially even more so when it comes to TradFi, people are going to be really, really looking towards the security of the chain and want to understand that, hey, when I go to sleep at night and wake up in the morning, are my assets still going to be there? And that's something why we believe and always have believed that having the security of Ethereum is really important. It's the type of thing you don't think about usually. It's like, okay, everything's secure until it's not, but you have to think about those edge cases. And I think getting individual investors is one thing, but getting institutional investors and getting a lot of those traditional assets, many cases regulated assets, to move over is going to be critical to be able to make that security case. And I think Arbitrum has a long history of that and is well positioned to make that case to both individuals and institutions alike. And Centrifuge, of course, why we're here today. Centrifuge's strong reputation and focus on that regulatory compliance that we alluded to makes them the optimal solution to tap into Arbitrum's deep liquidity, both in the DeFi side that it's already shown itself to be a leader in, and also in the traditional side, which is up and coming. And I'm confident and excited to see this marriage of Centrifuge and Arbitrum lead to new capabilities and new interactions and new usage of the chain that we haven't seen before, but the stage is set for this to happen in a very strong way. So super excited to be here today and to celebrate this interaction, this integration, and I think we'll see amazing things from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen, for that. I think, we're really excited to bring real world assets into Arbitrum. I think, just, I guess, taking that step back, when we say real world assets, we kind of use this as this catch-all term within crypto specifically to refer to tokenizing assets, but also enabling new and more efficient ways to finance them. And really, our view is that finance today is inefficient and expensive. And DeFi is really the first major breakthrough that we have at fixing this. And as we just heard, Arbitrum's well on the way to really becoming a home for these real-world assets on chain. And this is something that Centrifuge really wants to support the ecosystem in doing. Next slide. So DeFi still has a long way to reach maturity here and realize this potential. So one way we can see that is the crypto native focus within DeFi. And unfortunately, in today's market conditions, that means unattractive DeFi yields compared to even what we consider the risk-free rate. And as we've seen, as a result, we've really seen a tremendous growth of real-world assets coming on chain. So next slide. So I think really here for us, it's about giving on-chain capital access to the yields within real-world assets. And I think in some ways we can say 2023 is the year of real-world assets on-chain. And kind of an inflection point for the market as we see these assets really coming in at scale for the first time. Next slide. So as an investor with on-chain capital and you're looking to deploy this, real-world assets are really an important part of a portfolio allocation strategy. So for example here, when it comes to managing a DAO treasury, real-world assets really make a critical difference to maintain liquidity for the DAO, to meet short-term spending needs, but also for the preservation of value of a treasury long-term and really enable the project to the greatest chance at success in its mission. So what this really means in practice is a diversified portfolio of a broad spectrum of real-world assets. Next slide. Cool. So here I would really say Centrifuge is the industry leader to finally give on-chain capital access to these real-world asset yields. Over the last 3 years, since we tokenized the first asset on Centrifuge, we've led the industry to unlock the potential for DeFi for these assets. So from launching with MakerDAO to mint the first DAI backed by real-world assets, to bringing the Block Tower Professional Credit Fund on chain, we're really working with the leading institutions of DeFi, and now together with Arbitrum, to really bring real-world assets on chain and unlock the potential for these assets for DeFi. Over to you, Asad.
Thanks, Cassidy. I think one of the things that we're really focused on at Centrifuge is really the crypto native and on-chain markets. We spent all this time working with MakerDAO over the past 3 years, scaling their RWA operations. It's just one participant and kind of a wide group of activities going on over there. And we've learned a lot from that experience, and we've really learned what it takes to actually do this stuff at scale. For us, that means if you're going out to the market, we see DAOs, we see stablecoins, we see native protocols, anyone that wants to do kind of protocol and liquidity and take advantage of the real asset markets, take advantage of rates where they are today, this is actually a huge burden. So earlier this summer, we launched a product called Centrifuge Prime. And really what Centrifuge Prime is, it allows us to build infrastructure for DeFi native organizations. If you're a stablecoin, if you're a DAO treasury, if you're a protocol that's looking to offer products and instruments and kind of take advantage of the real asset space, Centrifuge Prime is essentially the infrastructure that you can use to get access to this. The way we offer this is it's safe, it's robust, it's legal, it's fully compliant, and it gives you kind of a programmable foundation, an infrastructure that you can really take advantage of, integrate with your protocol fully to ultimately be able to access a diversified RWA portfolio all through Centrifuge. We think this is kind of the best-in-class legal infrastructure in the market today. We think our tokenization platform is able to support the best types of assets that people want to see. And ultimately, we have the ecosystem and relationships that we think we can bring really institutional-grade assets and managers to the DeFi ecosystem. If you go to the next slide, I'll kind of dig into a little bit more about what we're saying here. Really, if you think about it, if you're a DAO treasury, for example, it's kind of the easiest example to think of. You are sitting on kind of a whole boatload of native tokens, maybe some Bitcoin, maybe some ETH, if you're lucky, maybe some USDC, right? And ultimately, you're not really earning a yield on those tokens. Maybe you're just appreciating it from the investment or the appreciation of the token value, right? Ultimately, what you want to do is you want to start, diversifying your treasury, kind of managing it more, providing liquidity to some of your native pools, some of your ecosystem participants. So you'll hire a treasury manager. That treasury manager will be really well versed in crypto native assets. They'll understand how to work with your DAO and your governance. But ultimately, to start integrating with the real asset market is kind of a whole work stream in and of itself. It's a whole value chain. It requires new relationships, new participants. It requires new frameworks, requires new legal infrastructure. And that's really what we're trying to do here. The way we think about it is that as a DAO treasury, for example, again, or as a stablecoin even, you have a specific kind of asset market that you want to invest in. Centrifuge provides kind of the three kind of investment mandates you'd expect to see. The first is liquidity. That's your most basic, cash and cash management, kind of safest, lowest rung of the investment ladder in real world assets. Then you have your preservation mandate. That's basically just a step above that kind of safe asset class, now earning a yield that would say offset the rate of inflation. And then finally, you have the acceleration mandate, which is really where you're starting to earn a yield and earn income from this. We believe that if the right manager can use these three investment mandates to create a diversified and differentiated revenue stream for their protocol, for their revenue, for their treasury, and we think that's a big kind of advantage. And that's the way people should be approaching the real world asset market. It's not just about investing in one single asset, it's actually about getting access to a whole section or a whole industry and a whole set of yields that can ultimately offer very bespoke and unique kind of opportunities for you and your needs. If you go to the next slide, the way that we do this today, this is kind of the starting point for every DeFi native protocol and DeFi native investor, is we set up what we think of as an out of the box legal structure. We call this the RWA legal conduit. Essentially, it allows us to create a tool, a legal tool that your DAO or your DAO treasury or your protocol can use to access real world asset markets in a compliant and safe manner. Centrifuge Prime, if you onboard to Centrifuge Prime, you're able to set up the legal conduit for you and your DAO. It's fully integrated with DAO governance, meaning that you can use it complete control within the relations of your token holders. It isn't something that's outside of DAO governance. It's completely integrated within. And then ultimately, we're able to get access to that diversified portfolio of assets that we mentioned before. We've done this successfully with MakerDAO. We've done this now recently with Aave. We have a few relationships with other DAOs that we're onboarding this to. And ultimately, I think Centrifuge Prime is kind of the key product that we're looking at to help onboard the DAO treasury market. I'll pass it over to Colin, I think, to talk a little bit more about Centrifuge and what makes it special. You're on mute, Colin.
It's too focused on the slides. Thanks. So in the context of Centrifuge Prime and all the lead up into this, right? Like one of the key pieces that Centrifuge is focused on, hyper focused over the last 3 years, is just building the best securitization engine that we can. So when we talk about a securitization, what effectively that means is taking the traditional real world assets that sit off chain, tokenizing them on chain, and then tranching that investment typically into a two tranche investment vehicle, right? Which is made up of a senior and a junior tranche. What's compelling about this, right, is when you think about attracting the best asset managers, the best asset originators, the best credit managers who want to access on-chain capital markets, they're going to want to use the best-in-class tokenization technology that's out there. And Centrifuge has proven that time and again. And so what you're seeing in front of us here is really just kind of the breakout of how this works, right? With the blue piece being the asset managers and the credit managers, the people that want to borrow money and offer an investment vehicle through the Centrifuge platform. And then liquidity pools on the right side, which is our efforts here with Arbitrum, which is actually making the investment available within the Arbitrum ecosystem from whatever asset manager is using the Centrifuge protocol. Next slide. So when we think about Centrifuge, recapping everything that you've heard from everyone here today, we have been around and we've been doing this for, I guess, 5 or 6 years at this point, right? And so when you think about MakerDAO, Block Tower and the first professional credit fund, even groups like New Silver, who minted the first real world asset with MakerDAO, we've been thinking about, obsessing about tokenizing assets and the right way to do it for a very long time. And that's what's led us to today. As Assad pointed out, right, what we're really focused on and what Centrifuge Prime will enable is for the on-chain ecosystem and for DeFi native or crypto native organizations like DAO treasuries to build a diverse and complex portfolio, not just a single asset, but being able to go out into other types of credits, other type of fixed income products, other types of investments, all via the Centrifuge protocol. And the ecosystem that we've built, right, whether that be the credit group, some of the expertise we've gained along the way, or the legal structures that we're building that enable DeFi and crypto native groups to compliantly and in a safe way invest into real world assets, that's a part of our journey, and it's a part of our commitment to where we've built, which is being DeFi and crypto native. And this has led to us really being the home for institutional credit on chain. Block Tower is kind of the first piece of that story in a lot of ways, and they've been instrumental in helping us get to where we are. And we're excited to continue to work with more institutional asset managers and bring the highest quality assets from the highest quality managers through the Centrifuge protocol to the Arbitrum ecosystem. In the context of all that we've done, right, the rise of tokenized treasuries over the last year on chain has made it outside of, well, if you consider stablecoins to be real world assets, they would be the second largest asset class on chain for real world assets, which is tokenized treasuries. One of the key pieces, or one of the key offerings that's coming through the Centrifuge protocol today is coming from a group called Anemoy. Anemoy is offering a tokenized treasuries investment vehicle on the Centrifuge platform, and that will be made available on Arbitrum as Centrifuge launches. In line with everything that we've discussed today, I think there's two key pieces to highlight here. I think first, some of the bullets that you can see in this slide make this a unique and differentiated product from a lot of the other tokenized treasuries that are out there. But second to that is when you think about Assad's point around Centrifuge Prime, right? We think it's important that one, if you're investing into real world assets, that you have kind of a safe place to land with a known asset class, and that's what this achieves. But second, as you think about interacting through Centrifuge Prime and building a more diverse portfolio, there will be more pools and more investment offerings coming through the Centrifuge platform for anyone in the Arbitrum ecosystem to access. And so this is an exciting part of the launch. It's a key piece of what Centrifuge is doing going forward, and will be available on Arbitrum as we launch there. One key case study I think we can look to as well is Block Tower Credit. Block Tower is a key partner of Centrifuge, and they actually launched the first professional credit fund in DeFi on Centrifuge when they took a $150 million senior line from MakerDAO and used that to fund structured credit investments in the real world. We've been working with Block Tower for 2 years on this. A lot of the thinking around Centrifuge Prime and what came out of that was born through this relationship and through these learnings. And as we grow and as Block Tower grows, we'll be continuing to look to find ways to bring Block Tower into the Arbitrum ecosystem, and of course, trying to find ways to bring more institutional asset managers and investment vehicles that are akin to or feel like a Block Tower quality investment. So when we think about getting started here, it's three quick steps. We'll be launching on Arbitrum in the next 3 weeks, maybe 3 to 4 weeks. And so we're very excited about that. As I pointed out, Anemoy will be offering a tokenized treasuries fund, which you can access quickly through by putting stable coins to work at 4.5%. And as Assad alluded to, when we think about the other investment opportunities that will be coming through Centrifuge over time, Centrifuge Prime will be a vehicle that enables you and helps you access other types of credits that aren't as simple and easy to understand as perhaps U.S. Treasuries or U.S. T-bills are. And so we're excited to launch. We're excited for everything that's here to come. Thanks for your time, and I think we'll move into questions now. Stephen, you have a question if you see it. You have 2 questions if you see them in the comments section.
Oh. Okay. I'll start with Stephen. Does RB ecosystem currently have any other compliant RWA-focused projects Centrifuge would be challenging? I would say I think it's very early days, at least in the Arbitrum ecosystem for this. Arbitrum ecosystem has shown its strength, very strong in DeFi, and the stage is certainly set. So yes, there have been other announcements as well, exciting announcements, and I think to some extent that's a good thing, right? For everyone, because ultimately liquidity is going to want to be in a single ecosystem where there are multiple opportunities. So yes, there have been some other funds as an example that have announced launching an Arbitrum as well, and they're definitely seeing a number of these announcements. But I think I don't think of it too much of as a competitive space, more as a consolidation of opportunities, and that's good because it means the liquidity will consolidate there for that. Okay.
I can jump in here too to add. I feel like, this space for real world assets in DeFi and particularly on Arbitrum is huge. And I really see Centrifuge as like one of the projects that can really bring real world assets into Arbitrum in a real way. But it's really just paving the way for, I think, we'll probably see a whole real world asset ecosystem develop on Arbitrum. And we see this really as like the first step in getting there. And I think, even to go into the next question here that MDR asked, what are the most important function that our Centrifuge brings for Arbitrum? I can start off there, and Stephen, you can add your thoughts too. I feel like for us, it's really about setting, as we mentioned earlier, like a legally compliant, really robust structure to bring real world assets into Arbitrum in a meaningful way, start to get them access to financing with the liquidity that we see that's on Arbitrum. I think, Arbitrum really being a leader there in DeFi liquidity is a great opportunity for these real world assets to start accessing this financing. And then vice versa, hopefully really, starting to grow what we see as the transformation of TradFi into like taking advantage of all of these efficiencies that we can gain with DeFi and with Arbitrum.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think just to add two quick points. One is liquidity drives applications, and applications drives liquidity, and it's sort of this cycle that happens in turn. So I think there are benefits for the applications and benefits for the ecosystem, and it's sort of a snowball that continues to grow as you see more applications and more liquidity fueling each other. Another thing is just like practically, DeFi summer is the term that a lot of us like to use for like the initial DeFi launch a few years back. When DeFi really took off. And I think one of the things driving a lot of the success was some of the rates at times were significantly higher than TradFi rates. And that's something that's obviously very important to investors. A lot of that has changed now. And that's not me saying that I'm not bullish on DeFi, because I am. I think it has proven itself to be very important and here to stay. And the rates will obviously change over time. But it also means there are people that are looking for rates that don't exist today in DeFi, and TradFi is emerging as a lot stronger, at least in the short term, or the now term, I should say. There, who knows what will happen? What the cycle will look like long term. But I think that's something that's going to be important to a lot of the core Arbitrum users as well. Again, one of the catalysts, I think, for success of DeFi in general, and now we're seeing TradFi have strength there.
I'll go ahead and take Lucas and his next question that he asked, kind of asking about the competitive landscape for RWA, how to deal with kind of TradFi, and where does Centrifuge sit with all that. My perspective is that I think there's three kind of important takeaways from Centrifuge and what we're trying to do here. The first is that we really have a unique product value prop. We're really focused on tokenizing underlying assets and financial collateral, putting those in a portfolio, with that portfolio existing on-chain, encoded and enforced by smart contracts or other programmable primitives on-chain, and then ultimately having the investment actually be available on-chain as well. I think this maximizes transparency and improves kind of the long-term efficiency gain you'll have for asset managers who are seeking cost effectiveness and cost operations efficiencies. And I think also it makes it just a more kind of composable primitive over the long term, rather than just having an investment or a fund share, for example, that exists on chain. That leads directly to, I think, the next most important point, which is the positioning kind of we're taking in also in this presentation, with like the emphasis on Centrifuge Prime and the kind of protocol on liquidity and DAO treasuries, is that we really have deep roots in the crypto space and kind of with crypto native organizations, and we think no one is better built for or building for this audience than us, right? That's MakerDAO and our kind of relationship with them. That's the work we've done with Aave. We're the first protocol to integrate with Aave. I think that this kind of leads to my third space, which is really you're talking about TradFi giants, and they'll be so they come in and eat us all. I would love it if they did. If they could do it, and I would welcome it with open arms. I think the reality is, as we know it well, the incumbents are never really good at dealing with innovation and technology. And Stephen was talking about DeFi summer. We've been building in the space now for several years. I think there's a real big emphasis and trend on bringing and integrating real world assets into kind of DeFi more properly. You can see that with Centrifuge Prime. You can also see that elsewhere in the market. I think the innovations that will happen in this market over the next 2 years will completely outpace everything we've seen in the last 10 years. And we'll kind of just see just a completely different world for DeFi and RWA. And I really think that that is ultimately how Centrifuge wins, how DeFi wins, and how kind of real world asset protocols continue to win as well, by keeping close to the innovation, working closely with on-chain markets, and ultimately doing as much as we can to leverage the technology and the benefits for things like transparency and automation and efficiency.
Yeah, I just want to echo one thing there, which is I think it keeps jumping out at me. It's like position itself in light of the increasing competition. Like for me, Centrifuge Prime is that vehicle, right? Where I think there's some of our competitors or some of the TradFi players or some of the new entrants to the space just aren't spending the time to invest in that type of infrastructure that is ultimately built for the on-chain capital markets and for the crypto natives that we see ourselves squarely as, right? And I think taking that time, spending that energy, spending that money, that resource is not something that everyone's willing to do. And it's a very long game, and it's a very long-term bet that Centrifuge is making. And I think it's absolutely 100% the right bet to make because it really takes commitment, it takes time, it takes energy to go on that journey together, rather than just pumping out one investment after the next and hoping it lands. And so I think the time spent on the legal infrastructure, the time spent on portfolio management and all the things that go into Centrifuge Prime really just cuts to the ethos of who Centrifuge is, right? Which is really a DeFi native, a crypto protocol in itself that wants to bring the right assets in the right way to all of our fellow DeFi protocols that are out there.
One thing to add to this as well, just a lot of this is reminiscent of questions we asked a few years ago when it came to DeFi. Like, back then, like the big incumbents or some of the big Ethereum players, like, is there going to be any room for new players? And you look back, like one of the biggest protocols as an example in DeFi today is GMX, which was an Arbitrum home project when they launched Arbitrum back in August of 2021. They were maybe one or two people and had very little traction. And one thing from a cultural perspective, which you might not necessarily appreciate, but it's shown to be true and continues to be true, is the Arbitrum ecosystem is incredibly collaborative. And what that means is, the protocols work together. You can see this in the Arbitrum DAO today. There was just what's called a STIP funding round where a lot of protocols came together and funded one another. It's an incredibly welcoming and incredibly collaborative ecosystem. And one of the really cool things about DeFi, which I think, extends to TradFi and blockchains, is the ability to use different building blocks and put them together in interesting ways, in ways that are better and bigger than the sum of their parts. And actually, that's one of the main benefits of DeFi. It's not just these siloed protocols; it's the ability to combine them in interesting ways. And you can, build a new protocol that just takes some of these building blocks and builds them a little bit differently and builds something that's entirely new. And obviously, it's going to take some time and work to get TradFi large players comfortable with launching and building in this manner. But that's one of the core benefits of the technology. It's not just, hey, we're taking something old or putting it on chain. It's, hey, we're giving you some new building blocks, but you can actually use these building blocks in other experiences, at least as the ultimate goal that I see it. And so I think based on what I've seen culturally, but also based on what the core technology is best at, it's best at this collaborative work. And, when people don't think about, hey, we're larger and we can just, kick everyone else out. It's like, hey, there's an interesting piece. How can we tap into that? How can we use that? How can we build on top and with them? And this is something which is not just like, okay, that sounds nice, like nice rainbows and unicorns. I'd love for that to happen. But you actually look back in time, that's actually what happens in the Arbitrum ecosystem. And I don't see any reason why that wouldn't continue on to the launch of real world assets on Arbitrum.
I can jump into the next question here from Peter. What is the CFG token used for on your platform? So for us, CFG is right now primarily two different things. So one is for governance on Centrifuge, and that's governance of developing the protocol, of managing the treasury, obviously. But I think one really important piece of governance for Centrifuge is what we call the pool onboarding process. And the CFG token is used in governance there to actually be an active way for token holders to decide what pools are able to launch on Centrifuge. And I think for the Centrifuge DAO, that's really important and key in determining, the quality of assets that are able to come onto Centrifuge and become available for investors to start putting liquidity into those pools. And then obviously another large piece of the token is transaction fees that are used to pay for both transactions that happen on Centrifuge, but also as the protocol fee that we recently implemented for issuers that pay a fee on chain. And so, yeah, the token is really primarily used in both of those ways. Next question here from Diamond Olamide. How is Centrifuge solving regulation and other challenges facing real-world assets tokenization? I could take a start at this. Maybe Asad, Colin, you want to jump in? I think for us, it's really been a long journey to work with both regulators as well as what I would consider the other institutions working in this space, primarily MakerDAO. We've worked with for a number of years now, actually, to really develop what Asad presented as this legal structure that we have today to basically, I think primarily protect investors into these real-world asset pools. And in the context of, for example, a DAO treasury, be able to have a legal wrapper here that's really protecting the rest of the DAO. So that it's able to really effectively invest in these real-world assets, meaning, if something were to happen, the DAO actually has legal recourse in the real world, but at the same time protect everything else that the DAO is doing from anything that might happen, on this side of its functions. And so really being able to separate those things in a legal way, I think has been really important in the work that we've done there.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add is that, it's the real world asset space is challenging because you have to kind of keep one foot firmly in the real world, which means you're firmly always dealing with kind of regulations and laws and policies that are, let's say, behind the times, right? I think everyone realizes that. But I think we're seeing a lot of attention on the space now, and we're starting to see a lot of, I think, policy kind of come to the forefront and change. And I think our goal has always been to kind of be the leading edge of compliance there. So I really do believe that compliance is a fundamental component. If you're investing kind of, let's say your treasury of your protocol, you really shouldn't be taking any risk with that. For us, that's why compliance is such a big deal. And I think we'll continue to kind of adapt and keep up with the market as it changes.
Any final questions from anyone else for myself or any of the other speakers today? All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thanks for all the great questions. Stephen, thanks for joining on and speaking from the Arbitrum side, and Cassidy, Asad, as always. We're really excited to launch. We'll keep everyone update through our Twitter and various other channels. And we'll hopefully be talking with a lot of you about Centrifuge Prime, about Anemoy, and about the Centrifuge protocol as we launch here. We are very, very excited. And thanks for joining today's call. Have a great one.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.